What is going on, everyone? I pray this stream finds you doing well, whether you're watching live or going to watch on the replay. Happy to be here with you today. We're going to be talking about leading authentically in the corporate arena. And I have someone with me today. His name is Kenny, and he is an expert on this topic. Kenny, I'm putting the pressure on you right now, but I know you're going to deliver. So, Kenny, tell everyone really quickly, like, why this topic is important for you and who you are.
No, I appreciate that, Jevon. So good afternoon, not good morning, good afternoon, everyone, or maybe good morning for some of you across the nation or globally. My name's Kenny Jones. I am currently a consultant in talent management, organizational development at a healthcare organization in Western Pennsylvania. The reason why this is so important to me, one is being authentic is something that is core to me as a human. I feel like it's important, one as a minority, but one as just an individual in the corporate space to be your most true self in the best way possible to guide others into what I would call as the true north. And so I'm very excited to be able to talk about some insights that I feel like might be valuable to give to each of you today, how I try to do that in my role and maybe guide leaders in that regard, being an informal leader myself in the organization that I work in. So appreciate you
Awesome.
having me, Jevon.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. We're gonna have a fantastic, fun conversation. I already know how that goes. So before we start, I think it would be shrewd of us to just say what authenticity means to you.
Mm. I would say, first and foremost, it is something by living your values. What that means to you, everyone has their own individual values. And if I'm looking off to the right, I did have some things that I wanted to make sure that I highlight. So I am mentioning that just from the outset, but I
Prepared. I
feel that,
like it.
yeah. Something that I actually wrote down and I wanted to make sure that I highlight is like the first thing as me as an individual contributor in my space is I want to know my values, and being able to do that helps you to be able to lead authentically and just be authentic in your space. So knowing what are some things that are very important to you, whether that be within your work world, your personal world, your moral compass, and allowing that to be the way in which that you are operating in your respective spaces. So knowing what you stand for. I know for myself, I find it incredibly valuable to treat others with dignity and respect. And something that I know our organization abides by is the platinum rule: treat others the way they want to be treated. And so those are ways that I embody that in both my workspace and personal space, because I want to be empathetic and understanding of others, because I feel like I want that in return. And I feel like speaking to myself as a younger version of myself, those are some things that I don't know that I fully experienced. And so that's something that I value immensely in being an informal leader, but also in the corporate arena, is that in that regard. Hope that
Yeah,
answers your question.
absolutely. And I love that you actually provide an example of how the corporate values, and not just the values that they put on the wall, but how they embody it and show it on a daily basis, how it should align with the individual values.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing a lot of people, like I do a lot of speaking engagements and stuff like that on empathetic leadership, emotionally intelligent workplace cultures. And one of the questions I am typically asked is, what do you do as a someone in the corporate space, right? When you show up, you have these certain values, but then you're in a space where the leadership doesn't show those same values. How do you handle that?
Mm. So well, you're asking me that as a question,
I'm
Javon.
asking you. I'm asking you. You're the star, Kenny.
No, I appreciate that. So let's ask, can you ask me that one more time so that I can
Yeah.
make sure that I answer that in the best way?
So say I know my values, I am clear on that. I want to serve with empathy and I want to treat people with dignity, but I'm in an organization or in a space where maybe it's just the
Mm.
leadership. They do not embody those values and show it. So what do I do? How do I handle that situation?
I think a big part of that, and something that I lean into in every aspect of my role as a consultant, but just as a person, is I always find it incredibly important to understand people where they're at. Everyone is on a different trajectory, a different path, a different understanding, whether that come from their own self awareness and leaning into that in various ways. And so I find it important in roles, in spaces where I feel like there's a misalignment from how I'm showing up and how someone else is showing up. I want to understand why you're showing up in that way and developing good rapport with them to be able to understand how can I help you get to a place that I think might be better for you, in the way that you show up on a daily basis, how you maybe are a leader in your respective spaces and are influencing and impacting those individuals in your respective spaces. I feel like that's essential to that, in how I'm able to lean into that with those within my organization, but also externally. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned like identifying their why. Why are they behaving that way? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's oftentimes, what I realize in my coaching is some people don't even know how they're showing up. They
Mm-hmm.
just, something happened, something triggered them, and that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a defense mechanism where they feel like they have to be this way and they just become that. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you bring that awareness to them, they're like, oh, I didn't know I was making you feel that way in the first place. No one ever said that to me. So I always feel
Mm-hmm.
like that's the first place to start is like help them to get awareness initially. And
Mm-hmm.
then once they have that awareness, see what they say is the best way to support them moving forward. Like if I don't
Yes.
like the way you're treating me, I need to make sure you nip it in the butt. And in the military, we used to say, handle it at the lowest level. Then once
Mm-hmm.
that happens, then you take those next steps. So I love that you mentioned that, Kenny.
No, and you just made me think of something actually in my role, actually, and I'm not trying to talk myself up or anything, but like in the
Talk
sense of
yourself
like in
up.
my
This is the place
in
to
my
do it.
I know, but in my role, respectively, something that I oversee for a 100,000 person organization is our 360 assessments, and that is deeply rooted in understanding yourself from that self awareness perspective, and how can you be a better leader but also be more authentic by leaning into some of those competencies that we want to evaluate our leaders on, from where maybe some of those gaps and barriers are in regards to those competencies or maybe strengths that they are previously unaware of. And so when you mentioned that element of self-awareness, that's something that I know I lean into a lot whenever I have leaders that are like, okay, so I'm sensing a little bit of misalignment with your connection to how we would want you to show up here. Here's the tool to be able to help you with that. And I use that very strategically to be able to help leaders and individual contributors across the system to gain that self-awareness, to help them be a little bit more authentic in their roles. Because you can't tell someone to be a better leader or a better person without giving them specifics.
Yes.
And so that has been something I deeply appreciative of that I'm involved in at the organization I'm in at present.
Yeah, and that's a great way to use the 360 assessments because
Mm-hmm.
again, you get that spotlight on the blind spots, and also, it's really hard to give someone ownership of a change if they don't even know that a change is needed. So
Mm-hmm.
that awareness piece, once you say, "Hey, I see this, and here's me helping you see this,"
Mm-hmm.
here's some action steps you can take. Now the onus is on them to kind of transform the way they act, and now you can hold them accountable to the change. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of organizations are missing that, and that's why that authenticity really is a struggle for a lot of folks because there's some people that are cancerous. They're really carcinogens to the culture and not
Mm-hmm.
allowing people to show up fully as their best version of themselves because they shut them down or it's their way or the highway or they have
Yeah.
to have the rest room or they need to be the smartest person. So that is a great thing, and I hope that all the listeners are like, okay, maybe I should start using 360s in that way if I'm not doing that already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that, and I
Yeah.
totally agree with that. I think that a big component of even being, I know that this is how to lead authentically. Like the title of this is leading authentically. You don't have to be a leader in a specific leadership role to lead, and that's something that I've had even for myself to really understand that more deeply for myself. Influence is a part of that.
Mhm. John
And I
Maxwell.
know, yeah, yes. And so being able to understand how you can influence through both integrity and consistency is a important aspect of being authentic in that space, even if you are an informal leader, such as myself. In leading project teams, in trying to guide executives to be able to see it from this perspective, from a cultural standpoint or a change management or what have you component. And so I think that one big thing that I always lean into is you don't need the title to be a leader. You can lead from wherever you are in the org chart. And understanding that has been something that I think has been very helpful for me. And I can't really attribute all that to myself. That's been a lot
Mhm.
with my leader, who has empowered me to think that way, who leads authentically in the most, uh, I can't even say, the most empathetic, psychologically safe, transparent, and true way that a leader
Awesome.
could.
That's amazing. So, and the greatest definition of a leader is they help other people become leaders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Help other people see their power. So you mentioned something in there that it's about influence. Leading is influence. And my next question would be, say, I'm with someone and we're kind of butting heads because we're both showing up authentically in whatever way that means for us. But someone shows up authentically and they're those that's just the way I am type of person, right? So what do you say to that? Like, how do I kind of rein them in a little bit? If we run into those types of folks who they're authentic, but they rubbing everyone the wrong way.
I think that is, I feel like honestly, that is the beauty of like working in diverse cultures and diverse organizations, because you're gonna run into people that think about things differently and say, this is how I am, and
Mm-hmm.
this is what I believe. That's the nature of team, that's the nature of leading, that's the nature of any organization that and culture that's beautiful. I say the one component of that is a little bit troublesome is if they lean into the aspect of this is just how I am and this is how I want to be. And I think I go back to and not trying to go back to like what I said previously about understanding them where they're at,
Mm-hmm.
but I would want to hear why they feel that way, because there's always a why behind that, and there's always a need to continually be able to understand someone else's perspective. You don't need to show up and say, well, you're thinking like the way you're thinking is totally wrong or idiotic.
Mm-hmm.
Approach it with a
Right.
sense of like empathy to try to understand. And I think that that's sometimes even a struggle in just not just the corporate arena, but even in just like our our political climate at present, is just ensuring that we're trying to understand other people's perspective in a empathetic and understanding way, um, or true way, because we all think differently. We all have different perspectives of things. I think very differently than you, Jevon,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's incredibly valuable. We bring uniqueness to our respective spaces, and so I think acknowledging uniqueness and beauty and differences in thought is important, but also there's an element of that when you mentioned that I'm just stuck in my ways, trying to understand why they're stuck in their ways and maybe why they're digging their heels in, to maybe help them in a way that's more attributable and understandable to them. Of okay, so I hear you thinking it this way. Maybe think about it this way, and approaching that very in the way that they're going to actually hear it, not telling them. Because like I know even myself, even though I'm an adult, if you tell me to do something or say that I'm thinking wrong, I'm gonna be stubborn and say
Yeah.
no, I disagree, like a kid. And so adults are the same way. So I just think it goes back to that rapport and truly actually understanding and being empathetic.
I wholeheartedly agree. Do you have any like tools or frameworks or resources that you typically use to help someone like with what we were just talking about?
Yeah. So I would say, and go back to, can you ask me your question again? Because I want to
Yeah.
make sure that I'm answering it again appropriately.
No worries. Just ask if you have any tools, resources, or frameworks that you typically use in those situations.
Yeah, I would say that it depends on the situation. So I would say yesterday, a good example of this is I was shadowing in an OR, and it was amazing. The first time I've ever done that, even though I've been in HR for 7 years now, and I was originally on Frontlines HR, I had never had the opportunity to actually be or go into the OR to see what it's like and understand their work and really be in the trenches. And it was very helpful for me now being in a system wide HR role, to be able to understand their world in a different way, because now I understand HR in a different way, because of not being on front lines. And something that was said yesterday, very similar to what you're saying, is like, well, this isn't the way that we should do things, and this our organization doesn't really care about us, and blah blah blah, and something of this nature. And I'm like, okay, And so I went back to a lot of what actually is true. I don't always pull in like specifically tools, theories, resources. Those are valuable. Yes. I feel like that's more valuable in like a coaching conversation. But when you're talking to employees and you just tout all these leadership theories to them, they aren't going to listen to that.
Right.
I feel like it's more valuable to say, listen to what they're saying and say, okay, so this is something that might contradict this. Like, this is what the organization has done for you. And this is what some of our listening strategies have done to be able to understand your perspective. Help me understand where that gap is. And by that conversation, I was able to understand that it wasn't really related to that experience and what they were saying. There was actually a broader disconnect that they had through the overarching organization to be able to guide them in that regard. So I feel like leaning into like real world examples of like what's actually happening is helpful for them. Of course, now if I'm talking to another PhD like myself, I'm gonna pull in some theories. Like you, I
You
know
have
that
to.
you are. I know that you are on that trajectory as well, and I commend you for that. August 8th, I'm going to be cheering for you. Um,
Appreciate you.
yeah. But I would say if I'm leaning into that, something that I really go back to is I love Brene Brown. I love Adam Grant, and I know you do too, because that's where we connected at WorkHuman.
Yes,
And so
indeed.
something that I gave to actually a leader yesterday was a book for recommendation from Brene Brown around Dare to Lead. And I think that book is so impactful on how to be a daring leader in the workspace, especially in a department that is so dynamic, so chaotic on a daily basis like the OR, and how you have to be daring in a variety of ways. You have to lead into some of the messiness. You have to push past some of those things, and while maintaining a sense of authenticity. And so I feel like leaning into some of those researchers that already are doing the work and have a wealth of knowledge outside of myself being 30 is something that I lean into in that regard. Is like, hey, here's a book that I think would be valuable to help you interpret some of the feelings your staffers feeling, but also how you can be a better leader in your respective spaces. That's something that I lean into. I don't really like touting those theories in that regard. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you kind of performed the gap analyses and said, what would you like to see with that person,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that kind of gives them a chance to really think about what's missing. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that question is such a powerful thing because not only is it the ownership piece, but it shows that we value you. We
Mm-hmm.
value what you think. We value your experiences. And another thing
Mm-hmm.
that you talked about is taking that day in a life approach, seeing how they interact on a daily basis. How can we
Mm-hmm.
support you a little bit better? What resources do you need that you feel are missing? And
Mm-hmm.
that is something that is a game changer, no matter what industry you're in. And you can
Mm-hmm.
do that not just in the workplace, but in your friend circles and your relationships. I think we need to do that a little bit more. Is to say, you know what? Instead of us just talking, let me see what you have going on. Let me
Mm-hmm.
experience your experience just for that little bit, and it makes a heck of a
Mm-hmm.
difference.
Mm-hmm. No, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
So let me ask you this: as we wrap down, time goes fast. So I don't
It
know if you
does.
realize, Kate, but we got about 10 minutes left. So with those 10 minutes, what would you say someone is actually struggling with being authentic in a workplace? They had a bad experience with showing up as their full version of themselves. So they're like,
Mm.
I don't know what to do now. I really want to. I feel like I'm in a safe space to. What would you recommend they do?
Yeah, I think this is unique to each person, and I think that something that I did is I want to speak from my own experience, and I know this may not be attributable to everyone, but I like to do that because I think that it at least gives an example and how I did it. Previously, and again, I'm not going to name where that was. I was on a team that I felt like was very what's the right word, competitive, toxic, and comparing. And I understood how much of an impact, I never really understood how much of an impact that had on me on being authentic in the work world, but also in just really understanding myself. And so sometimes it is important. Someone said something to me recently whenever I was coaching an executive leader on some things that they got from a 360 assessment. And then their manager was talking to me about the feedback they received and like, what should we do? And they said something in the regard that sometimes it is just necessary that you've run your course on that respective team or that area. And that was something that I had to realize myself. And I found that incredibly awesome that that person said that to me, because it had a full circle moment to me whenever I was sitting there talking to that person as a consultant to help them understand how to best support their leader that is experiencing some of those concerns in their areas. But sometimes it's run its course. So you have to sometimes recognize maybe this isn't the environment for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not easy to come to that conclusion, because there could be financial reasons. There could be a variety of other personal reasons. There could be so many things impacting that, but you have to understand that you're doing something best for you to be able to be the best you in the places that you are, and float within what have you. And so I think that's an important thing to consider, is like sometimes it's run its course and sometimes you just have to look elsewhere to be able to find that space where you can actually be you and can leave that impact and speak up thoughtfully, um, and you don't feel like you're being quelled in that sense. I'm not saying that's always the case, because some people might say that's throwing in the towel. That's not. It's just recognizing what your needs are and where you need to be. Now, if there is a space where that is a little bit different, which I think is more so in line with what your question was, is how to
Both.
do that well,
You're answering
well,
both, so thank you.
yeah, while staying there. I think you have to still, you don't have, I think something that I go back to is what my mentor said to me. Not everyone deserves to see every part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding how you can still be parts of yourself while maybe not always bringing certain components of yourself into work is okay. You're still being authentic. You're not being fake. And I've even had to struggle with that, because I'm like, am I being authentic by not just like saying how chaotic I was this weekend, or like how anxious I am about this, or what have you? No, you are being authentic. There's a reality, and like you need to protect yourself, and not everyone deserves the deepest parts of you. Um, and
I
that
love
was
that.
something that was so important to me to realize, because I'm an open book to a lot of people, but again, not everyone deserves access to the deepest parts of me that are my part of my authentic self. And so you're not relinquishing yourself by doing that. And so being intentional in that regard, if you're staying in a space, is important. Um, Find ways where you can be humble, find ways where you can be vulnerable and encourage individuality. But don't let that be, don't feel like you have to just like, be a water hose and like let everything come out. Do that in a way that you know is most true to you. Especially if you've had a situation where you feel like you've been burned in the past by trusting someone by being authentic, and um, you were met in not the best way.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, but I think it does go back, and this is the last thing will say. I will talk about my boss a lot. It always goes back to your leader, truthfully, the person that you report to. The amount of psychological safety that is afforded to me personally on my team has allowed me to be able to find ways to be authentic in the workspace, and that's changed over the last 4 years, 3 years I've been on this team specifically. And so knowing that you have that support also is important from your team, and your leaders in your respective spaces is important to be able to feel psychologically safe to be yourself in ways that
Absolutely. Absolutely. That support is so key, especially if you've already experienced had a negative experience with being authentic. And
Mhm,
authenticity, I love that you said authenticity is, you start where you are with authenticity.
mhm,
Yeah, and you start as small as you need to, but I still recommend, like, to everyone, as you said, like, align with your values.
mhm,
Authenticity doesn't mean you have to be loud and, upfront in
mhm,
front of everyone. It's showing up. If
mhm,
you feel comfortable with the way you're showing up, if you feel confident that you're giving your best when you show up, that you're not putting on this facade that is not you at all, then
mhm,
that's authentically you.
mhm,
So I think that, well, I know that, everything you said is going to resonate with the audience, because we're in the space right now where some people just don't feel like they
mhm,
can be them. They don't feel like
mhm,
they can have all the parts, even the best parts of themselves out there, that they need
mhm,
to adapt and be assimilated into a certain way to move. And
mhm.
I say that your power is really going to be in being your unique self.
Mm. No, I love that. That is, I'm gonna steal that quote. Your power is your key to being your unique self.
Yeah.
Completely agree with that.
Appreciate that. All yours. All yours.
Thank
Well,
you.
I appreciate you coming through and dropping so much knowledge. Ricky, thank you so much for tuning in. I see your comment. She said great information. So we are dropping some good stuff here. Well, you are. So appreciate your time. Can you tell everyone how to connect with you?
Yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I am very active on there. Social media, I do keep that quite locked down, but if I ever create like more public version while I'm in the fitness space, please don't hesitate to connect with me on there. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best way to do so. Just look up Kenny Jones, and you'll find me on there, and happy to connect and chat. And no, I'm not the most have all the answers, but will happily dialogue and knowledge share in ways that I can with each of you. And really appreciate you, Jevon, for having me today. And firstly, pushing me out of my comfort zone, because this is the first time I've done something of this regard. So, um,
Yes. That's what I'm here for. Here
yeah.
to push you out the comfort zone. So, no, I appreciate you. Did a fantastic. The way you conveyed these kind. This can be complex. And it can be like abstract to some folks. So the way I appreciate the way you simplified something that can be so complex and abstract, and provided so much value. So to the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're catching the replay, still drop those comments and reach out to us, because we're still here to answer all the questions that we can. If we can't answer it, we'll help you find the answer. But remember that after this conversation, until you move forward, always remember to keep ascending and show up authentically.